sessions that we're carrying on Zoom will be available as part of the festival YouTube playlist after we're done with actually doing the festival. Yay! So our next speaker is Jane Westbrook about Dancing with Death.
But don't forget who's taking you home and who you're gonna be. So darling, save the last dance for me. So I think that death, the conversations about death need an extreme makeover. And thank you, Gail, for bringing those conversations out into the light. And we're going to talk about how we do even more extreme makeovers. So this is how it starts. Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no. How to get out of the death costume. Let's see if we can do this. I may have to have some help with the first start. Here we go. The strip. We aren't going to do Grim Reaper today. That's one of the things that we're going to let go is Grim Reaper. And there's some other things that we're going to let go. But let's talk first about dancing. Okay? Because that was the title we came up with, Gail and I, and one in a fit of creativity came up with dragging death out of the closet and learning to dance gracefully with it. I think that's probably why we're all here in one way or another. But when you look at the whole dancing thing and the song that I just played, you can do whatever you want, but your last dance is going to be with death. That's the last dance. So let's talk about that as if it was your final performance. I'm going to do, and it's going to be face to face with this guy or not. I'm not grim and I'm not a reaper. I am a death educator and an advocate, and I love changing the story. I love changing the words that we use. So if we're going to talk about dancing with death, let's look as if this is our final performance and we want it to be a good one. We can't just go running up onto the stage at the last minute and do it. Well, you can. It happens all the time. And it's some of the saddest times of my life when I walk through that, when people just run up onto the stage and they say, oh God, now what? So where I come from is education and practice, thinking about this way in advance, a generation back and another generation back and another generation back. Let's keep spreading this circle. One of the business names I work under is Wider Circles, is let's make these circles wider so that we're talking to anybody and everybody about this. And when we're prepared with more information, we can enter this last dance with some grace. We can enter this last dance with some conscious presence. So I teach long classes. I teach 7-week classes about this, and it's so that we get it in our head that we have these choices and we have these options and we have these things we can choose from. So let's understand what they are. There's another little piece I want to talk about here too. And this, as I was working on this, I realized when people say having the conversation about death is a hard conversation. My family won't talk about it. The kids won't talk about it. My brother won't talk about it. So is it death that we won't talk about? Or is it dying? that we won't talk about. I came up with this analogy this weekend watching the eclipse, because you have, if you look at the eclipse, you have all of this sunshine, then you have this shadow that starts moving in, and you only have like, what did we have, 4 minutes of total eclipse, and then the sun starts to come back. Well, this is kind of what we look at with death. The death is the eclipse. So if we just had to talk about death, we might could get away with it. We might could say, well, let's just talk about the 4-minute eclipse. Put your glasses on, come outside, and let's just talk about death. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the dying process, and we're talking about the emotions. We're talking about the processing. So this is also that wider circle that we've got death here in the middle, but this is just, death is an event. Dying is a process. And after death is a process. But death is an event. So why do we say it's too hard to talk about death? Let's talk about the guts of this. Let's talk about the guts of before and the guts of after. The stories that you told today, the stories of the doula work, and I do the same kind of work in a different venue, but those stories are so important for us to tell each other, to talk about what it really looks like when you're present for the event, or if you're present for the process, or all of the above. All of the above. But when you talk about and educate yourself about the processes and options that you have for approaching this event, it is like that last dance, that dance that we're the last dance, because that's what we're all going to do. There's an interesting Buddhist tradition, and I've taken it into a lot of situations, and I did it with it's around burials, or in the Buddhist tradition, the burning of the body, taking it to the pyre to burn. And as they're taking the body up the hill to burn, the head of the body is pointed towards home. When they reach the halfway point, they stop and they turn the body around. So the head of the body is pointed to the next world, whatever that is. What if we did the same kind of thing? The call I was on the other day, somebody said we've got into a conversation about terminal. What is terminal? And this Oriental physician said, we're all terminal. We're all terminal. We're terminal from the beginning. So how do we demystify and how do we destigmatize the conversations about death? And I think the first way we can do it is quit saying, just as a suggestion, I'm not telling you how to do it. Maybe we quit saying that it's a hard conversation to have. Maybe we start saying, I really, Gail knows how to do this. It's like, let's just talk about it, bringing it out of the closet, and inviting it into our world, and say it's just like birth. I mean, the doulas, talking about the beautiful etymology of doula, is somebody who assists in this transition, this journey. And if we change the way we talk about it, instead of acting like it's something that is fearsome, don't talk about it. Go back in the closet. If we don't talk about it, it won't happen. Well, we know that's not true. So if we look at the, if you conjugate death Hello.
Somebody else is joining us.
If we conjugate death, alive and dying are over here on this side, death is here, and dead is over here. But the two sides on the sides of death are where the feels are. That's where the fear is. So maybe if we quit saying it's hard to talk about death, it's like, I love your thing, you know, if you're talking about sex won't make you pregnant. Well, talking about death, I'm not sure we're talking about the right thing, because I don't fear death, but I sure don't want to do some kind of ugly thing over here on this side. The dying process is what I'm concerned about. And I believe, and it's part of what I teach, is that the more you know, the more options you have, the more choices you look at, the more facts that you gather, then all of that goes away. And I'm not saying that it's going to be an easy trip. And we can all hope that it is, but it may not be. But at least if we've prepared ourselves by having these conversations, just like birth plans, I can't tell you how many birth plans I've talked about. It's like they got this plan all worked out. They're going to do it at home, and they're going to have, you know, this beautiful situation, and something happens and they end up having a C-section in the hospital. But at least you've got a plan. At least you have a plan, and you can. And I'll tell the story of my mother. My mom died when she was 95, almost 96. And when I look at the power of words, the words we use, I believe, are incredibly important. They shape our world. My mom always said, and she had all of her stuff in order, and she said, you know how I'd like to die? She said, I'd like for y'all to find me face down in my garden, doing what I love. Well, in the last couple of years of her life, we moved her from the house with the garden. And she said, well, I guess I need to change my wish for how I want to die, since I can't do that. And I said, so what would that be? She said, I think I just want to wake up dead. So if you look at the power of words, that's what she did. She woke up dead. She went and she watched Antiques Roadshow on Monday night, had apples and popcorn, and she woke up dead the next morning. So to have those kinds of conversations, it's like, what would be your choice? Do you have a choice of how you would like to? I mean, I would like to go out, you know, sideways on a motorcycle, real fast. But what kind of choices? What kind of model could you create for yourself? Any ideas of what anybody that's thought about it? You got one?
Well, the power of words. My mom always said very clearly she wanted to be wrapped in a sheet and buried in the yard with the dogs and cats that she buried in the yard, you know, by her garden. But we couldn't really do that. So, but we ended up doing as close as we could to that. So natural burial of like that.
Okay.
And we did it all ourselves.
Right. What a
Was,
wonderful.
I mean, as close as what she would have wanted, we were able to do it because she'd always talk about it and said what she wanted.
Right. So she
created it.
She created that. She created her image of how it would look. Is there anybody in here that would like to die in a hospital? Nobody. Cool. So we take that one off the list. So how do we do this? But to do that, we've got to educate ourselves, because dying at home, in hospice, it makes it a whole lot easier. If it isn't in hospice, it has some challenges. You need to know what you're doing. You need to have a support team around you. You need to have made some plans around it. And so that's the main thing that I want to emphasize. And I'm not going to take up all the whole hour today. So if we've got some stories that we can tell about people kind of charting their own death, and people that ran off the edge. I'll tell you a story of somebody who charted her death, and it was a last minute kind of thing. She was in hospice. I was walking through the process with her. It's been years ago. And I went in, I was with her off and on every day. And she was not family. She was somebody who had come to me that she had no family here. And so I ended up walking through the process with her. But she was on her last, I knew she was on her last day or days. And I walked into the room with a CD. She loved music. And my niece had brought me this CD, and she said, I don't know why you need this CD, but she says, I think Lola needs it. And I'm going, okay. So I took it with me when I went over to hospice, and I read her the names of the songs that were on there. I said, track 1 and track 2 and track 3 and 4, and I read her all those names. And then I put it on. It was electronic music. It was like, okay. And she was an organ player. I said, okay, let's just go with this. Well, I was holding her hand. I had another friend in the room with us, and I felt her begin to leave. And my friend is sitting across the bed looking at the CD player. And so Lola takes about 5 or 10 minutes and she's gone. And so I asked my friend Michelle, I said, so did you happen to notice what the tracks were that were on the CD? And she said, yeah, track 4 was playing when we felt her start to exit, and track 5 was playing when she was gone. I said, do you know what those tracks are? The first track, track 4, was I Set Myself Free. And I had just read her that list, and it was so deliberate. It was like, I'm taking this. This is my exit line. And I said, and she said, and 5 was still playing when she died. And the title of it was Moving On. Mm-hmm. So we all have those stories, and I think she orchestrated that herself. So the whole thing that I want to talk about is us orchestrating our future. I'm going to take a little bit of a side trip here and talk about, and this is in some of the training that I do, it's a question that we ask a lot. So who has an advanced healthcare directive? All right. Where it used to be about 10% of the people, maybe 20% of the people would have an advanced healthcare directive. There's a lot of thought that goes into that. It's not just checking the boxes, but it's also a place where we can set some intention. I rewrote mine, and I'm going to read this to you just because it's, I couldn't find an advanced healthcare directive that would say all the things that I wanted to say, because it is check the box. No, don't do this and don't do that. I don't want this and I don't want that. So this is mine. I don't want to end up as a vegetable. Kurt and Donna, who are my medical power of attorney, you know what that means. I trust your choice. I don't want to spend my last years, months, weeks, years bedridden. A few days maybe while I make my escape, but preferably 0 days. I don't want to have a long drawn out death. There are other choices. No treatment that would have a long, painful, dependent recovery or death. May not apply for younger people. Your journey, I'm in awe. If I had that kind of recovery, I'd be probably looking at this age, an exit route. No heroics at the end of my life, or heroics in any medical care for that matter. Maybe heroics for an injury. I'm okay to die. My being alive does not define my worth or my relationships. I don't want to run up big medical bills anytime, but especially not at the end of my life. These things aren't in an advanced healthcare directive. And I found that, yes, it will serve to tell the medical people what I do and don't want, but this tells the world what I do and don't want. I don't have the money or resources to pay for assisted living or long-term care and would absolutely not want to end up there anyway. V said and made voluntary stop eating and drinking, for those of you who don't know the words, and made medical aid in dying are high on my list of ways I would consider to die. If I am not lucky enough to just wake up dead like mom, or take a long nap, which some of my friends have told about their parents, which is a long-standing family tradition. I don't want my family or transition team to have to care for me for a long time. Maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. That's about it. If I start to die, don't stop me. I mean it. I am not riding the dementia train. V said would be my friend. And so then I went on, when we make statements and start to plan something out, there are responsibilities, like rights and responsibilities. So what are the things that I can do to make these things happen? Stay active physically, socially, and mentally. Stay healthy, feed myself well. Ask for help when I need it. This is the hardest one for me, is this next one, is don't do stupid stuff. Don't get my knickers in a twist about stuff I can't change. Don't get my knickers in a twist about stuff that I think I can change. Be careful about putting things on the list of things that I think I can change. Stay out of other people's business. Be radically honest about my health, my living situation, and my needs. Scale down the amount of my stuff. Don't become involved with any multiple medications, pharmaceutical programs. Make sure all my affairs are in order and pre-planned and thoroughly discussed. Make sure I maintain good balance and strength in my life, particularly in my body, to prevent falls and avoid pain, but also in my mind, so I don't become a pain in the ass for my family and friends. Have DNR, DNI, no CPR, VSED, and MAID mentality discussions and documentation. If I have a dire terminal illness, look at it carefully and objectively as perhaps an exit strategy. So if we look at these things as things that we want, don't want, and the responsibilities that go with them. The other thing that I push probably more than anything else, is, well, doing your paperwork and doing it consciously, is have discussions. Bring death out of the closet. Bring getting old out of the closet. Bring changes in your physical condition out of the closet. Bring family conflicts out of the closet and fix them and heal them. So that's kind of the program that I have today about dancing. But I want you to think about death. It's just a snapshot. It's that picture, but it's the big stuff on each side. And it, going back to Gail's thing about sex, sex education isn't about the emotion of sex. It's about, if you do this and you do this and you do that and you do this and this goes there and this happens and this is what all this looks like, but it doesn't prepare people for what that's going to feel like. And I just got this huge visceral response in my body from being 17 and saying, holy cow, what just happened to me? What did I just get involved in? Because this is a whole other world that I haven't, I mean, I knew how that stuff worked. But we aren't taught about that. So to think about that and to stretch our circles wider so that we're thinking about and educating ourselves about options. I'm a volunteer with End of Life Options New Mexico, and options is our big word. Options is our big word. Understand what your options are and choose them carefully and consciously. So that's kind of dancing with death is, and do it as gracefully as you can. And any of us are going to do it quite as gracefully as like. So
Questions?
I teach also, let me just tell you, I teach a 7-week class with Bernalillo County. And in my wider circles program, I teach everything from aging in place all the way to what do we do with our dead body, what our choices are. So it's a little bit expanded off of yours, but not much. So we have medical autonomy, we have all of the advanced healthcare directives and estate planning and what to do with your dead body. So these are all things that are taught in that class too. So if anybody has any questions, I've been doing this work for about 20 years, and it came from a couple of deaths that I participated in that didn't go like I wish they had, that they could have been better. There could have been conversation. There wasn't. And I think that's why I teach this, is let's have the conversations. So if anybody has any questions, I'm up for questions, comments, have the conversations. Yes, ma'am.
I like what Mark Twain said, we celebrate birth and lament death because we're not the one involved. You should get the sympathy card when you're born and a congratulations card when you get that.
Right. Totally. And I think part of that too is that we don't know what's on the other side. We're entering the mystery at the point of death. So we get caught up in all of these things that we have to do. But when people talk about being afraid of death, or a lot of times it's because they don't know what's on the other side and haven't moved to a place, or don't go to a place of where there's the mystery there. It's like, I don't know. Who knows, maybe it's different for everybody. But I think that's one of the things that stops us from talking about it, because we can't talk about that part. Or we don't know what it is. I mean, and there are spiritual paths. But any other comments or questions? There are brochures out on the table from End of Life Options New Mexico. We've got a couple of people in here that are in training. There's a volunteer program with them, and an incredible website where you can get all kinds of information. So, anything else?
Can you talk a little bit about your work, End of Life Options?
Pardon?
A little bit more about your work, you volunteer with End of Life Options, you said, and
Okay, yeah.
what do volunteers, what does that look like for volunteers?
Okay, there's three different groups with End of Life Options New Mexico, and one of them is the public outreach and education, and I'm one of the chairs of that. And we do events. In fact, we'll be over at the Mortuary Mall tomorrow.
Yes.
With additional information. And so that is one of them, where we do tabling events. We go out and we look for peak groups we can talk to. We do presentations. We have tables that we just man. We're doing one out in Paradise Hills at the end of the month, a senior connection table. So that's something that people can do. There is a client service volunteer, which we do basically the same thing that doulas do, maybe not quite as intense as they do, because we can walk through the death process with people, and we counsel them and educate them about what their choices and options are. There's also a clinical outreach group, which goes out and trains hospices, assisted livings, physicians, medical communities, that kind of stuff. So we have those three things that we do. So, yes.
So, do you guys have, positions that provide MAID?
Medical aid and dying? Yes. And there are hospices in town that are very active and very supportive of the process. And again, having the conversations, this is an important thing. If it's something that people are considering, they need to have a conversation with their provider, because not all of them are on board with it. Just a little tiny bit of history too. How many of you are familiar? I mean, you probably all have a little bit of information about medical aid and dying. It's been a law in New Mexico for 2 years. It became a law in July of 2 years ago. And there have been over 400 people who in the state that I know of that have elected that as their exit strategy. is medical aid in dying. And what it does is it's a 6-month prognosis, basically the same thing as hospice. You don't have to be in hospice to utilize it. You have to be mentally competent, and you have to be able to self-ingest. But you a support team around you, and that's part of what our client service people and end of life options do, is that we provide that support. We've been bedside for a huge number of those deaths, and it is one of the most gracious, gentle exits that I've ever participated in. So, yes,
I
ma'am.
just had a question, and the person who wants to do the aid in dying, do they have to have a terminal diagnosis within 6 months? Is that?
Yes,
So that people with disabling conditions,
no,
they can't do it, even though they're miserable and they can't.
Right.
Okay.
right.
That's what I thought.
You have to have a terminal diagnosis or prognosis.
But we all have a terminal diagnosis.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. But
well, yeah.
I mean, like this, like
Well,
the person has like MS.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's what I thought.
I've seen people kind of jump a hurdle to, who have those kind of terminal, long-term, not 6-month prognosis things. I've seen some of them jump a hurdle or two so they could qualify, but that's a whole other conversation. And again, personal choice. And it's good because the law, when it was written, was to protect those people and to protect people who might be taken advantage of. So it's written very tight. And New Mexico is kind of like the poster child right now for medical aid in dying, because we had such a team with End of Life Options New Mexico on staff, ready to go when the law was passed. So, and we've been able to train people and walk through this process with a whole lot of people who've used it and people who haven't. Yes, ma'am.
So if you have, your personal physician is not, online with doing this, can they refer you to someone
They should refer you to somebody under the
that is
law.
comfortable with it? Or
Under the law, if they will not, it's like any other medical service. If that is not a service that they will provide you, they can refer you to somebody that will, or you can go find your own and call End of Life Options. You know, they got a huge referral system too. So, and this is the same with any medical procedure or medical situation. If they won't tell you everything, we have the right as patients for them to tell us all of our options. That's why I said in End of Life Options, our big thing is options. Look for your options, look what your choices are, and be conscious about the way you choose them. So you can always change. You can always change providers. Because I've had people where the providers are like, no, not gonna walk through that with you. So, any other questions or comments?
Is there any work being done on people who are early in dementia and definitely want to not continue on that path to get help?
There's another exit strategy that is being used around the country called voluntary stop eating and drinking. I mentioned that a couple of times in my talk, that if dementia was the train that was showing up at the station for me, I take voluntary stop eating and drinking because I don't want to ride that train. It's you need a support team, medical aid and dying, you need a support team, and through End of Life Options, we can help you find those supports. So
those supports exist in New Mexico?
mm-hmm.
That kind of support exists in New Mexico?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We've got probably 50 volunteers with End of Life Options, and we got what, Kelly, we got 18 new people coming online. Yeah, we've got 18 people that are just finishing up their trainings and are coming online. So we've got this huge range, everything from hospital administrators to regular people off the street like me, who just have a passion for helping people explore their options and know what they are and educate.
What's your favorite part about your job?
About what?
Your job.
Bringing stuff that people don't know bringing them choices that they didn't know they had. That is my very, very favorite thing, because people in a 7-week class, people are constant, I call it shock and awe. You know, you started it here, Gail, shock and awe. It's like, I bet you didn't know this. And people are amazed. They said, I didn't know I had that choice. I had one lady said, I didn't know I could tell the doctor no. It's like, oh, I learned that when I was 24. I was like, no. And so empowering people, empowering people and teaching them things they don't know. My partner said that I need to have a t-shirt that says, I am not here to defend the status quo. And so that is that is kind of my work in life, is to say, what if we did it another way? Gail does that well. So anything else? And if anybody wants to contact me further, I've got some cards, and there's end of life options brochures out on the table. And also there are copies out there, frequently asked questions on medical aid and dying out there. So if you want to pick those up, we're gonna take a quick break.